So in case you don't have a Supabase account, go and start creating your Supabase account. If you have a Supabase account, then you don't need to create a new one. So if you don't have a Supabase account, please create your Supabase account while we're talking, or maybe listen first. Then when we get into deployment, you have to create a Supabase account. But I believe almost each and every one of us have Supabase account, except Peace. Peace has not been the AI game. So do product manager, project manager. Okay, so now from all that we explained in plain English, this is what goes on in many applications, several applications that we talk about today. They use the same approach. Now, when you talk about hosting on the cloud, we have to get a perspective of what that means. So all production ready applications use a similar flow. There is Docker, there is Kubernetes. I think, is it Docker and Kubernetes that relate, right?
Yes.
Yes, Docker, Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is a bit more complex, I think. So somehow many people don't use it. So very trained people use it very well. So they are all called containerizing applications and languages, right? So these application languages are properly written by very senior engineers, but we don't need to understand how were they written, how did they frame all these applications. They're just a simple, this indirect knowledge that I would like us to have here. So now, Docker is like a wrapper or packaging. So you know how when you want to send a product abroad, or let's say you buy something from Amazon, Amazon will package it very well, right? They'll package it into a package. Or buy something from Jumia, they package it nicely. Everything is inside. They you bought earpiece is inside. You bought a laptop, the laptop will be there. Anything you bought will be inside. So what Docker is doing, that Docker is wrapping and packaging together our application called n8n. And the application called n8n has so many things. It has logo, it has favicon, it has applications that are connected and integrated to it. It has the nodes, it has all kinds of things. So imagine you have to go and install each of those things one by one by one by one by one by one. It will be an endless installation. So what do? They now use Docker to containerize. So the word containerize means a container. They got a container and they put every part of this application called n8n inside that container and made it available so that anybody that's able to access that container either online or on his machine, install that container on his machine, has access directly to everything n8n as an application. So n8n is just simply an application, but it was made open source by containerization. Right, so they containerize it and made it open source and say, okay, anybody that can access it can host it anywhere. You can host it on your machine or you can host it on the cloud. By using Render, not because Render is the only option. You can use Render, you can use Hosting Jar. I think Hosting Jar recently is hosting n8n also. You can use some other hosting platform that support containerized applications. So what is the job of Render here? So I told you what Docker is doing. So Docker wraps our n8n. So this our n8n is actually inside Docker here. Right, so it has been Dockerized. It hosts the whole n8n app. Let me just write n8n app. So it hosts the n8n app. Then you now pull it. You now pull it. So if you get it on your GitHub, for instance, GitHub is just a repository where applications or code base and all those things are stored. So the whole code base, the Python code, the everything code that is running this n8n app is Dockerized inside this container. And this container is put in a repository on GitHub. That's why you have to create your GitHub. You either clone the template or whatever. Then what you do, you now need somewhere to host it to make the application accessible. So the fact that it's containerized here, it's not accessible. It's not available for users to use it, either for you or other users that you may deploy any workflow within this n8n. Users cannot use it. So we want to make it available for users to use it. So what we are now doing, that we're now looking for where we are going to host it. So we're looking for somebody that will rent an apartment for us. So Render has a lot of apartments online. So there are two ways. You can either use Render or you can decide to use your machine. So I used my machine. The first attempt I did is I used my laptop. So my MacBook became my Render. I said, okay, I don't want to go and borrow this. I am a landlord of my own. I will host it on my own space. I will use part of the space of my laptop. So I used so Victor was saying this is technical. So there are some codes you are going to write. So you use your what do they call it now? I'm trying to remember what we did, right? So you are going to you have to write some scripts, right? You have to write some scripts to be able to install this on your laptop. So what you do simply is that you will download Docker When you download Docker as an application, you will now access the code and access it from Docker, because Docker is already Dockerized, right? So you access it from Docker, and then you are going to create like a local address. So that local address shows that it is hosted on your machine. That's why it shows local. Local means you are the landlord. This thing is hosted on your own machine. That is why most addresses. So anytime those of us that product managers that work with developers, sometimes you see them talking about my local host. Local is working on my machine. It's working on my machine. So most times engineer will tell you he's working on a machine. Why is he working on their machine but it's not working online? Sometimes you realize because it's not hosted online. So what is working on your machine will not work for others. So if I take my own working on my machine local host and I give you that address, it will not work because it's not inaccessible. It's not a public. It's a private property. So we can't access it. Your network cannot go to another person's laptop. So we need something that is Elon Musk. We need something that is satellite, something that is online, that anybody can call that address. So when you say www.this, then yes. But if you say localhost 3000 or something, all those codes, those are web address that relates to my own machine. I am the landlord. So that is what the Docker is saying. Let's leave hosting on machine now. So now, if you want to host on the cloud, Render now acts as the cloud landlord. It now creates, so Render has so many rooms and apartments that is renting out to different people that want to host something. So you will now go to Render. As a Render, can you borrow me one of your rooms? I want to host everything. So you will take responsibility for everything. So Render will pay for the electricity bills. Render will pay for everything that's related to maintenance of that room, everything that you are hosting. So you bring your Docker this day and you come and dump it on your Render cloud here. So the space that's going to be taken, Render will be paying for the space. The electricity bill needs to run it to be alive. Render will pay. The maintenance that do, Render will be doing everything. So you don't need to worry about it. You are saying, I don't want to worry about it. Just give me a shortlet. Let me stay there, be taking care of everything. Why my application is just there. Render will host it and make it available on the cloud. Anything cloud means can be accessed anywhere. That is what the word cloud means. Cloud simply means access anywhere. The opposite of cloud is local. Local means it's on a machine that only somebody that has access to that server and that machine can access. Cloud means it's available online, and whether you're in Europe, you're in Japan, anywhere you are, you will have access to that particular application. I usually tell people that I don't need to carry my laptop everywhere. Even if they steal my laptop today, God forbid, I can just pick another laptop anywhere and keep working because most of my work is online. So if I go there, sign into my email, I can open the same workflow. This is the same workflow I did this. So if Victor tells me somewhere that send me that workflow, I'll just borrow somebody's machine, I'll log into my email straight up, I'll open Figma, and this Figma will give me access straight to this workflow. Once it gives me access to the workflow, I'll just copy it and send it to Victor and return the person's machine back. Why? Because this Figma is in the cloud. Most applications today are in the cloud. SaaS applications are in the cloud. Right, so Render hosts everything about this packaged app and all the resources, the code base, everything. It hosts it here so that we can access it. So once it is hosted here successfully, it now deploys a link for you. And that link, currently, the link that Render deploys. So I have two types of link. I'm going to show you my two types of links that I have. I have two types of link. This is the link of the one I hosted on Local. So this is my web address. So you see HTTP, it's not secured, so there's no S. It's not secured because there's no security. This HTTP, right? This is an unsecured link, just my own machine. Local host. This 5678 is a port. This port shows the address. Now this port is the unique n8n port that connects me. This is my own unique connection to the n8n listen, to the n8n server. So once it connects this port, so this port is unique for the n8n connection to connect me to the Dockerized file in n8n. So my machine is the host, and then I'm giving this port to connect to that Docker file and access n8n. So if I'm going to access n8n via that file, it's now going to ask me for administrator this in that administrator password and username and password is what will now show that this guy is licensed on our Docker this thing as somebody that we have given permission to host this app. Then the link will load for me. But if you put this link on your own machine, it will not load because you don't have Docker on your machine. And even if you have Docker on your machine, it has not, n8n has not authenticated you on Docker to access their app that has been containerized. Are you guys following? So this is the local list. These are the local list link. And the local means it's hosted on my machine. The port means it's connecting me to the containerized n8n application. Now let's see the one that is connected to this now, to the cloud. You're going to see the difference in our. You see that this particular link is secured. It's secured because it's hosted with on the cloud with security, domain, and all this. Let's not go into that. But now you're going to see how is this link now. Can you see this is HTTPS? and then it's called n8n service. Why? Because that web service is hosted this n8n service XS73. This is the code that is given to render, to host dot render. So it means HTTPS, this web address links me to n8n services that is hosted on this thing, that is hosted on render. That is what this address is saying. This address is saying I am going to n8n services to access n8n application that is hosted on render. Render is my host. The first one is saying that I am going to my computer to access n8n via a specialized code that is giving me to access the Dockerized file. So that Docker is installed on my laptop. This Docker here is installed on my this second link. The Docker is installed on my GitHub, which is online in the cloud, and n8n as render accesses it from my GitHub and licenses me with an address to use n8n and host n8n using their own apartment. So this is what happens between Docker and the render hosting. So you can see the difference in so if you check everybody's link, if Victor drop your link, you're going to see .onrender.com. If Ajiri drop, you're going to see .onrender.com. So if we host somewhere else, it will be .onhostinger, right? .com or hostinger or whatever. So it will show that this is hostinger that is hosting this or whatever. So that is showing the address of who is hosting. Okay, so now let's now finalize. What about the Supabase? Why Supabase? Why do we now need this memory? So we need the memory because this application is here. The application is containerized. Containerized means all the properties and particles and everything about the app is available, and it's available where it has been hosted somewhere here for everybody to access. So when I access it and I build any workflow here, it's using a temporal memory called SQLite. Now, this temporal memory is not enough to make the application remember what it did the last time. So imagine somebody that is a human being, he has everything but no brain. That person will not remember anything. So there's what is this sickness that when old people start getting old, they start forgetting things.
Dementia.
Right? So now render without Supabase, render as amnesia. So render has amnesia. Anything you tell it, it will act like sane. You know, those people will be sane, they'll be smiling now. The next thing they'll lose their mind. So render with amnesia will know everything. Then suddenly, when it shuts down, remember we told you it shuts down every 15 minutes. So if anything happens at all that disrupts the network and the internet flow, and there's a shutdown somewhere, that happens somewhere on Docker or it happens somewhere on render or anywhere, what happens is that everything you did just wipes away. When you come back to render, render will start asking, what is your name? Who are you? You say, I'm your son. Are you my son? Really? That's what render we do. So to avoid that, we now brought in the DB. We brought in the database. I say, render, we don't trust your amnesia. So DB is an intelligent machine. So it's memory. So everywhere in an application that database is used as the memory. And what does it do? It stores all the information that is happening here. So if you do your workflow, it will store the workflows. If you created any prompt here, to store the prompt and say, this is the prompt you use. And this prompt is you use Gemini for it, and you are instructing the workflow that it should do like this. If you upload any sheet, the sheet will be stored there. So next time you come render, come and say, bring back the workflow. Supabase will remind it the workflow that was drafted. If you now say, okay, where is the file? Supabase will say, I still have the file here. You say, okay, what was the prompt? It will now remind of the prompt and everything. So this Supabase acts as an independent memory that houses and stores every information that you need to make your application work, so that whether there's a downtime or whatever happens, your workflow and everything is not missing. It's stored up in the database. Do we understand? So this self-hosting is simply this is what we are doing. We are simply accessing n8n in a container. We went to order n8n from Jumia, and they deliver it in the container for us. We now went to render and say, please help us house this application. It's too big for us. It cannot enter my house. If you enter my house, it will eat up all the space, but you have plenty space and you're renting it cheap, but I want the free version. Okay, help me host it. You understand? So we now drop it here, and we now come to Supabase and say, Supabase, I don't trust render. Render has amnesia. Anything I do on render, help me save it, so that next time I ask for it, you always respond and supply the information. That is what we're doing. Once you're able to do all this, you have self-hosted n8n, and you can access it anytime and use it. So this is what is happening. So let's ask our questions if we have the questions. So why are we hosting? Because n8n as a platform, they did all this. So they are paying for Docker, They are paying for rent for their own hosting this same platform. They are paying everything. Then they are paying for your database or whatever, everything. So n8n is paying for everything. So n8n now decided that if you want to just use our own application, that the one we have hosted. So n8n went through the same thing. They built the app, they containerized it, and then they did their own hosting and whatever. So you just come in, log in, and use. So they say, okay, if you want to use our own hosting, our own application hosting, you are taking our space. So I don't pay for everything. So you have to be subscribing to us, everything to do the job for you. So you can create your own instance like this and probably make others to use it. So that's what Ajiri was saying. But when the others are using it, you'll be seeing everything that they are doing. So when you are doing your workflows and all that, n8n will also have access to many of the information, some things you are doing. So if you want privacy and you also don't want n8n to have access to whatever information, your workflows, and at the same time you say, n8n, I don't want to pay you, don't worry, I can do it myself. So you go and say, n8n, say, okay, if you can do it yourself, my application. So what is the breakthrough here? The breakthrough was that n8n containerized the app and made it available. And say, okay, if you think you're good enough to host, I say, we have the app here, come and take it. So most applications don't do this. They don't containerize and make it public. Many apps don't do that. ClickUp does not do it. Several of those. So any application that containerizes and makes it available and say everybody hosts, we can do the same thing and host it. So there are several apps like this. There are several open source apps that work like this. There's one platform that is called Modu that is being used in Pora. It's the same thing. They made it available. Even the other, in my past company, the HR tool that they were using is the same thing like this. You can host it yourself and all that. So there are many applications that you can host yourself and then you can tweak and even rework some certain things. So you have access to the code. You can even maybe, some will even allow you to change the code or add something to it. So this is the same thing. They simply containerize it and make it open source. So once it's open source, you can pick it up, you can go and rent a space in the cloud and dump it there and connect a DB and you're good to go. Simple. So if you ever hear of self-hosting, this is simply what it means. It's not a big story. Okay, so let's get your questions before we go into the practical. So